This is the Scenario Radio Show. Real talk with a playlist.
We're back here on the Scenario Radio Show. Today's show is about 1981 as we kick off Black Music Month. We're going to talk a bit more about Black music in 81 in a little bit. But right now we want to talk about the people who would have experienced it as children during that time, the Gen Xers, with our question of the week: what makes Gen X Gen X? You hear about baby boomers. Everybody, baby boomers, one of the largest populations for a long time. They pretty much defined what our culture in general in America was for a long time. Millennials come along, and now they, on some level, doing the same thing. Right. And sandwich in between those two is us, the Gen Xers. So that's why I want to ask you all today, to hear what your thoughts are. What is it that makes Gen X Gen X? What's our distinction to you?
I think one of the things is that we are survivalists. Like, as being a Gen Xer, we have transitioned from, I remember like being in my school and thinking we were all going to die from a nuclear war, and having to like hide under our desks because of nuclear war. Mm-hmm. And then we went through, just like we talked about earlier, we went through the whole AIDS thing where, building an AIDS quilt. That was a whole big thing. We went from rotary phones to cordless phones where you could get outside on your stoop, but you couldn't go past that stoop or else you would lose the signal. You would lose the signal. To, being adept at using a cell phone. We went through the BlackBerry age. We are the greatest generation to be able to transition into different moments, and we have kept up. Plus, we look amazing. I mean, our generation, there's something in the water, something in the streetlights coming on, making sure all of us get home something was out there. But our generation, like, I look at like my high school friends that I'm friends with on Facebook, and I look at their pictures, and all of them, except for maybe two, all of them look real good. Some of them had rough lives, and I get it. Everything ain't easy for everybody, but we look great. We have survived, but more so than survived, we have thrived. And I think that we come with a whole culture of we come from the beginnings of hip hop. We come from, the R&Bs and watching your parents and your grandparents have it red light or blue light, red light, blue light parties in the basement or in the living room. We come from rent parties, but we are able to transition and bring all of that knowledge, and all of that is in us, and it has been instilled in us. And so we have a plethora of goodness in us.
Yeah, I completely agree. I even remember having my first beeper. I got a beeper, and
hit me on my hip.
On my hip, I ain't had nobody to call me, but then having to stop at the payphone, it was still between payphones and cell phones. And I remember when those first cell phones came out, they were like huge, like I don't even know, the size of a dang old computer now. But again, all of us, we look like so good. Like, really, we look better than some of the millennials. I see some of these, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, y'all already look 60, and I'm 50. Like, what y'all doing? Y'all drinking too much yak or whatever they call it, it's like, y'all need to drink some more water or something.
Some water. Go outside and play.
Go outside.
Well, they didn't get to drink from the water hose. So
no,
we got to drink from the water hose. What I remember about being a Gen Xer was right after civil rights. My dad was one of the first black police officers hired to the Chicago Police Department, and the reward was we were able to move into this beautiful home in a predominantly white neighborhood, and it was a period of white flight. I saw our white neighbors leaving by the droves, and more affluent black families coming in. But it was also like we didn't have to really fight for anything. We experienced. We were after the Watts riots, but we didn't really have. I don't remember us having any real social disturbance or civil disturbance in our early years. Not until Rodney King was, I think, my first experience with a civil disturbance.
Yeah.
So we had I remember kind of having it kind of sweet as a kid. Like, life was good. Those parties that you talk about those red light, blue light parties. Lots of families coming, backyard barbecues. We had block clubs. We had block club parties. Everybody's outside, gone
We
all
had
day,
all of that.
summer, all of that.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
But I think that one of the things that we did, and we didn't know we were fighting it because it was just part of growing up. And if you grew up in kind of like a hood, but that crack infestation was huge.
Ridiculous.
And it definitely devastated, communities and families like nothing else. Now they're like, oh, opioids, hold their hands and be nice. But, crackheads, it was like, shoot them on sight.
Right.
So
now it's billboards with
billboards
with clear people talking
now
about
they're
we need to
sick
get
and they
help.
have an issue and all this other stuff, and stuff like that. But when we grew up, it was just Tony the crackhead on the corner, and that was just, and Tony used to be such and such a brother, and now he was just Tony the crackhead. And so you just saw the devastation and the blight that went through, because I grew up in Harlem, the devastation and the blight that went through the communities, and all of that was planted. And there was an intention. And now that you see what the intention was to drop the levels of real estate down so that people could come in. And now here we are in gentrification. So, but it's all a master plan.
Yeah. I saw a lot of that too. I was in the DMV during that crack era. And DC, Maryland, and Virginia got hit extremely hard. It was ridiculous. And we saw a lot of those individuals that you're talking about. You knew them in one way a couple of years ago, and then now here it is, they're a crackhead, and like they just take on this whole other life, and they're standing there, and it's hard to believe. You're like, wow, what happened? So that was crazy. The other thing I remember about Gen X, and I want to see what you all think about this, I believe we were more sexual. I think we were sexual. Like when I think about the millennials, they don't seem to be having sex as much as we did. Do you all feel like you were really sexual as you were going through your life?
Yeah.
And I still am. I got a baby on the way now. You know what I'm saying?
Hence my children. Yes.
30 and 31. I picked up on that pumps and politics. Pumping and politicking is what you was doing. But I ain't want to say nothing.
I mean, but that's what it is. It was what it was.
Yeah, that's where we came up. Sex was a big part of our lives.
Sex was a big thing. I mean, it was, it was Pumps and the Bumps and all those other songs and things, and you're out hanging out and, you see somebody and y'all. But I think part of it was we were never really taught how to date.
No.
We were never taught how to be courted. We're not taught to, just to date and to date several different people, because then, if you dated several people, you were a hoe. But, in reality, dating several different people is healthy. And you get to learn what works for you and what does not work for you. And those are things that we were never given because, number one, they did not want to teach sex ed in school. And most parents weren't going to talk about it at home. So it was, here you go. What we learned was here are condoms, go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Judy Blume book.
Oh, right. Because we all read Forever.
I think what summarizes the Gen X experience is something that speaks to is this idea that we were in the middle of a generation who saw a transition post civil rights and didn't really know how to translate what they had learned to us. And then the generation after us having access to way more information than any other human being has ever had, and being very decisive about what that information means to them, whether they're right or they're wrong. So somewhere in between there was us figuring it all out in the middle of all these technological transitions for ourselves.
Yeah,
I just want to add like coming out of civil rights. Can you imagine? Like they was kicking it. They had that was a victory. So it took them 10, 20 years of just like, whoo, we made it. You know what I mean? And that happened in the after the 1919 pandemic. You had the Roaring 20s and the Roaring 30s, and then you had it with Gen X. And actually, I believe we're about to experience it again for these next 20 years. Coming out of this pandemic, post-pandemic is going to be another major shift generationally. I believe that this generation of Zennials, who the young people who are like still in high school, down through like middle school, that I believe I have already professed that is going to be the greatest generation of history, the history of American civilization, because they're coming out with access to all this information, because they can build technology and bridge business and technology, and because they've gone through this amazing drastic change of having access to the free world and then having it pulled back and having it getting slow access to it again. This generation, I believe, they are more, and not in a negative way, they're more emotional, they're more communicative, whether we want to believe it or not. They do communicate in ways beyond our comprehension. They're changing the new way jobs are for YouTubers and TikTokers. We don't think that that's a real work, but that's
It is
absolutely real work for them.
And I think one of the things that they've built in is business, technology, and self-care.
Yeah,
They
there's
really
that mental
believe
health,
in
mental
taking
health.
care of that mental health and the self-care. You know, once we came out of the civil rights movement, you know, it was like, yay, we shall overcome. Now what? Now what are we going to do? There was no game plan going forth. There was nothing going forth. And so then it became, you know, make as much money as you can. You know, we had the Wall Streets, we had the cocaine, we had the, you know, all of that stuff. It was as much money as you possibly can to do what with. Because 9 times out of 10, the drug dealers still stayed in the same communities, sitting upon millions and millions of dollars. And these were smart people, because you have to be smart people to, you know, run a whole enterprise, but they were never taught what to do with that money.
Right.
You know,
and I think that really speaks again to that idea of having to figure a lot of it out. That's the Gen X thing, I think, more than anything, having to figure a lot of it out. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. Let's get back into this conversation a little bit more when we get into the top of the first hour, the second hour of the show, when we come right back. But right now, we're going to check out the Commodores with Lady, right here on the Scenario Radio Show. When we come back, we'll keep the conversation going. Y'all stay tuned.
This is the Scenario Radio Show. Real talk with a playlist.